Hello and welcome back. Now, growing up in the 80s and 90s, it really has been amazing to see how fast technology is progressing. And of course, games are a part of that as well. I think these days a lot more people are playing games. Lots of people who might not even consider themselves gamers might well be playing games on their mobile phone, or maybe they're just playing some basic games on their computer, games that came with it. I remember reading in a computer magazine years and years ago, and there was a prediction that one day computer gaming would become bigger than cinema. Now, I think that's been reached and surpassed many years ago, but some of the technology that sits behind some of our favourite games is more impressive than ever. We've gone from really basic games in the old days where basically the aim of the game was to achieve the highest score, to these days where you've got complex graphical adventures, you've got stories and you've got plots, and in the game the actions you take may well directly influence the story as it progresses. However, one thing's kind of always stayed the same. It's basically you sat in front of a TV playing a game on a console or computer with a game's controller. In 1992 we were given a bit of a glimpse of the future. The film The Lawnmower Man released, and I suppose for a lot of us this might well have been the first time we heard that phrase virtual reality. But it gave us a look beyond game controllers. In some ways some of this stuff is actually quite accurate to modern day. We've got hand and finger tracking, some of the headsets kind of look familiar, but let's move ahead 25 or so years and see what we ended up with. Now, there were several stabs at virtual reality over the years. I do recall hearing about the Atari Jaguar VR headset that never came out, but I think the first realistic attempt at a commercially available VR headset was probably the Oculus Rift Development Kit 1. There was an online Kickstarter for this device, and there was a lot of excitement at the time. This looked to be the first commercially available VR device that actually had a hope of taking off. This was released in March 2013, and it had a really low resolution. This was just 640 by 800 pixels per eye, but it was enough to get started. From a modern point of view, this is really quite basic. The headset itself had no positional tracking, so whilst you could look left and right and up and down, you couldn't actually move your head closer to or further away from objects. So it felt a bit disjointed. There was no way I could afford one of these at the time. After all, this was just a development kit, intended for developers to make their own VR games. But I was interested in picking up the next iteration, so I'm just going to walk you through some of the VR experiences I've had so far. We're going to see some of the steps we've been through, some modern day VR, and we're also going to take a look at some randomly chosen Steam games, just to see what's available at the moment. In 2014, the next Kickstarter opened. This was for the Development Kit 2, and it had a much higher resolution of 960 by 1080 per eye. I got on this Kickstarter and I paid $462 for this. This was a big step forward over the initial release. It had that much higher resolution, but it also had a camera for positional tracking. This positional tracking was something that's going to be essential. Not only can you move your head left and right, you can also move your head into and out of the world. So for a believable scene, yeah, head tracking is essential. This is probably the very first thing that I ever saw in VR. This is the Tuscany demo. It's basically just a small world for you to walk around in. I don't think you could interact with anything. The DK2 didn't ship with hand controllers, but you could still use the Xbox gamepad to move around. So what did I think the first time I saw this? Well, looking around, I thought it was absolutely incredible. You could look around, you could move your head in and out of the scene. That magic was kind of lost though the moment I tried to move forwards. It really did make me feel nauseous. Your eyes are telling you that you're moving forward, whilst your body's telling you you're staying still. I think this is pretty much common for anyone who tries these for the first time. I would recommend trying a seated VR experience first, but you do truly find your VR legs. Like I say, first time I played this I felt quite unwell, but I stuck with it and I can play games no problems at all now. But yeah, for a first introduction this was quite impressive. There wasn't much in the way of real games available at this time. Remember, this was just a development kit, so people were trying new things and seeing what stuck. This is the Cyberspace demo, and it's basically just a recreation of a fairground ride. Again, the graphics look quite basic, but don't be fooled, this demo was probably one of the first really impressive uses of VR I found. The only way I can really explain this is, if you've ever been on one of those pirate ship rides that swings forward and swings back, when it reaches the top of the swing, you kind of feel like you go weightless for a minute. And whilst you're obviously not physically there, your mind and your eyes do play tricks on you, and it recreated that sensation perfectly. So yeah, again, whilst the graphics aren't great, these sensations and the way your eyes play tricks on you with this demo, it was absolutely incredible. Next I found the Red of Paw demo. Again, this was back in 2014. I really remember this demo for the head tracking. Just looking at these things on the shelf, being able to move your head in and out of the scene and look around. Thanks to the new Oculus positional based camera, it really made these 3D worlds come alive. The real killer app for the DK2 though for me was the Star Wars Battle of Endor demo. I think this came out in early 2015. I don't think it was licensed or anything like that, it was just a fan-made demo. But this was absolutely incredible. You were basically in your own Star Wars film. You're in an X-Wing, you can look behind you, R2-D2 is there, you can fly close to the Death Star and the other enemy ships. This demo gave a real good idea of what you could achieve with this sense of scale of some of these worlds. I'm not sure if you can play this on modern hardware, I have given it a go, but without much success. I'd love to be able to play this again. I did sell my development kit too shortly after this. This is because they were really in demand, and I wanted to get rid of this before the actual hardware released. So yeah, I put it up for sale and I sold it for the exact same amount that I paid for it. But I didn't really lose out by buying all this kit in the first place, so I got to have a few months of playing the latest and greatest experiences. But for now it was time to sell it before commercial hardware became available. In the end I ended up getting the HTC Vive rather than the Oculus Rift. I think it had a slightly higher resolution, I liked the look of the controllers more, and it had an extra positional camera. I think the Oculus only shipped with one. This is both good and bad. This is the box of the Vive, and you've got enough electronics in here to send a man to Mars. You've got the two positional cameras on the left, and these need to be screwed to your wall in opposite corners. These then sense the position of the headset and tell you where you are in the world. Now I really hate cables, but I was prepared to go for it if it was the better VR experience. This was 2 or so years on from the development kit too, and this was around 2016. But this time Valve, the owner of the Steam distribution platform, decided to release a demo. This is the lab and it's completely free of charge, and there's a bunch of VR experiences here. My personal favourite was perhaps the archery minigame. Anything that involves guns or pointing at anything in VR usually works really well with the controllers. I really love the art style of the graphics in this game, and I always keep coming back to it. I think this game's pretty much perfect. There are some other VR archery games available, but I think this one just nailed it properly first time. Seeing these games being played on a flat screen whilst I'm playing them in VR, you can never get a really good idea of how the game looks. But coming from the development kit too, the image quality was much improved. I think the only thing I didn't really like about the Vive was the cables. The headset itself was wired to a PC, and that was fine, it gave you the power of the PC, but every time you sort of turned around you were getting tied up in the cables and it really became a pain. There were so many different things to interact with in this VR playground. This video is taken from probably one of the first times I played the lab, and you can see I pick up this little balloon gun on the table, and you can see I visibly sort of step back and shocked when the balloon explodes. It's really cool, it's so realistic. I really like the way you can create the balloon and you can sort of tap it and bounce it on the floor with the other controller. It kind of behaves just as you would expect really. But so far all we've seen is demos, so what about the games? Games were finally coming out. Some of the first games I picked up for this were the Serious Sam games. These had been remastered a few years ago, but now they were available in VR. Even today in 2021, I still think these are some of the best games you can get in VR. They have made some changes from the normal PC version. Here you can carry 2 weapons at once, and there are some slight differences with the number of enemies as well. But I think something like this is absolutely perfect for VR. Look at something, point your gun, shoot. So there are 3 games available. This is Serious Sam: The First Encounter. If you've ever played any of the Serious Sam games, it's all about dealing with endless encounters of massive numbers of enemies. And there's a few big bosses thrown in there as well. The most famous enemies in these games is the kamikazes, or the screaming gypsies as I've always known them. Guys with bombs for arms who just keep running at you screaming. What a great enemy. And there's absolutely loads of them in this game. They managed to improve on this even more with the second game. I think some of the environments you visit are just a bit more colourful and stand out a bit more. There's still loads of enemies, you think you're safe, and then you hear it. In Serious Sam 3 we got a slightly different graphic style. It had all the carnage of the previous 2 games, and yeah, I'd recommend you try any one of these 3 games, I think they're all really great. However, the first VR game to get real popularity was Beat Saber. This is the game where you hit targets in time to the beat, and finally, we got to dance to Lazy Town's Cooking by the Book.
It's a piece of cake, it's like a pretty cake. It's the way it's crazy. You gotta do the cooking by the book. You know you can't be lazy. Never use a messy recipe. The cake will end up crazy if you do the cooking by the book. Then you...
One game I picked up ages ago was Elite Dangerous. I'll be honest, I haven't spent a huge amount of time in this one. It does seem quite complex, there's about 1 billion different key combinations to do various things with your ship, but playing this in virtual reality works so well. Being able to look at your ship's cockpit, look behind you and stuff like that, it's perfect. The times I have spent this game, I find myself just sort of flying around, flying to an asteroid, parking up and looking around. It's awesome, really relaxing. Probably not what the game developers had in mind. You can play this game with an Xbox joypad, but I know a lot of people go all out on this with flight yokes and throttle controllers, so this is definitely one I need to put more time in. But yeah, for now I just like flying around, seeing the different things, flying near ships. Going back to playing this on a 2D screen with just the Xbox controller, it's so shallow. Being able to freely look around really makes this game pop. Ever since the first development kit 1 came out, people have tried to recreate roller coaster experiences. Some of these are more successful than others, but yeah, not something to play as your first game in VR. You'll probably feel very unwell. However, at this time I was starting to hit the limitations of the HTC Vive. I really hated the wired sensors you had to have stuck on your wall, and I really disliked the fact that the headset itself had to be cabled to a PC. It seemed really restrictive. HTC did release a wireless headset adapter. This at least removed the cable between your PC and the headset, but it was really expensive. So I decided it was time to sell up, wait for the technology to mature, and I dipped my toe into the VR world a few years in the future. Recently the Oculus Quest 2 headset was released. After a bit of research, I decided to pick one up and get back into VR. Along with the headset, I also bought the aftermarket head strap. The one that comes with it is basically just a piece of elastic, and it's really rubbish, especially when you're looking down. The headset tends to sort of slip around on your head, so I'd say this is kind of essential. Again, we've got a much higher resolution than the old Vive, 1832 by 1920 per eye, and this headset solved two of my biggest complaints, which is why I went for it. The first thing was it had inside-out tracking, so the headset itself had sensors on it that sensed your position in the room. So you no longer had outside-in tracking, where you had to have the sensors on the wall to detect the position of the headset in the room. The headset itself would detect the distance between yourself and the walls, so it was a much cleaner setup than the old Vive. Whilst you can connect the headset straight to a PC, there's also a way to wirelessly stream games over to it. The new headset's also a completely standalone system, so if you want to try VR out, then yeah, this is the way to go. I am just going to be using it with a PC though. I don't think I want to take on another game store. I've already got Nintendo Game Store, Xbox Game Store and Steam. I don't think I need another one. There are some higher end VR headsets available, but these still use cables. I do however think this is probably the way to go. I do think this is the one that's going to take off, mainly because it can't be any more simple. It comes shipped with a power adapter, the headset and the controllers. That's it, you don't need anything else. And yeah, I think it's going to win through its simplicity. I did do a bit of preparation before buying this headset. First thing I did was to upgrade my wireless router. Wireless has always been second to wired connections in my opinion, so if I did want to use this thing wirelessly, I was going to buy a decent wireless router, and this was expensive. It was about 350 quid. But there was method behind the madness. I have my PC in my little gaming office here, and as you can see it is quite small, definitely not enough to swing your arms in VR. There's also two PCs in here, 3 monitors and a TV, so it can get really hot, so not a place I want to play VR in really. However, because we're now wireless and we have the inside-out tracking, I can use the headset in another room, so I don't need to be anywhere near the PC at all. So downstairs in the lounge I get to use the VR headset and I get all the power of the PC as well. So the first thing I did after buying my new headset, other than playing my old games, was to go on the Steam store as they had a bit of a sale on, so I thought, yeah, let's go and buy 10 random games and see what we got. The games were so cheap I pretty much bought anything. Let's see what we ended up with. This is Barrage, costing 99 pence, and yeah, it looks a bit rubbish to be honest this. It plays okay, quite difficult though, actually really difficult. I don't think I managed to get off the first level. But yeah, choose different weapons to shoot different types of enemies out the sky. You can't really complain for a quid, can you? This is Adventure Golf for £2.51. Capturing video from some of these VR games is not always easy, so although you don't see a full screen image here, it looks as any other VR game does with the headset. I think a golf game works really well in VR actually. A nice change of pace, nice and relaxing to play, however it does sort of miss some sort of cutesy background music. I think that would make the game. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this one. I think I'll be playing this one again. I think this was quite fun. Next up is Kittypocalypse. And yeah, I think I'm going to have to choose random games more often. This was absolutely brilliant. I'd never heard of this game before. I just, like I say, clicked some random games that I thought looked half interesting, gave them a go, and this was really good, really good. I think it might also be available in a non-VR version as well. But working your way around the game board or game map with the hand controllers works absolutely flawlessly. It works so well. And you get a great sense of 3D with this as well. So the game itself is kind of like a tower defense game, where you have to stop the evil kitties getting to your base. And you do this by placing gun turrets and other sort of turrets around the map to stop the onslaught. However, there are different types of cats. Some come armoured in armoured fridges and you need different turrets and stuff to defeat them. Others can be taken down by the miniguns. Some need to be taken down by the lasers. Some run really fast, whilst others are slow and really heavily armoured. But this was a great game. If you get a chance to play this, I'm sure it's available on consoles and other things like that. Give it a go. I thought it was really fun. Definitely going back to play this one. Next up is Together VR. I think this game got me on some sort of government list. It had one of the tags of dating simulator in the description, so I couldn't resist. Let's take a look at this rubbish. So the exciting plot starts out with your girlfriend watching TV, who all of a sudden decides she wants to play darts. This is exciting stuff. So to get to the next level, you've got to beat May at a game of darts. And yeah, obviously I'm going to do it. Anything goes in this high-octane game of darts. You've got to do what you can do to win. Win at darts and we can finally move on, but there is something creepy about May. Level 2 and May comes home with a VR headset. The game takes a really strange turn and you're shooting at your wife/girlfriend and she throws circular swords and laser beams at you. It's really strange. You've got to defeat May again and avoid all the traps before we can get on to the all exciting level 3. Unfortunately, this is the closest it actually comes to feeling like an actual game. There'll be more awkward creepiness shortly. Next we're on to an exciting game of Gentao Shutao Pu, or Rock Paper Scissors. All the dialogue in this game's in Chinese, I think. Here the loser of the game has to eat a black bean. I guess that's something that tastes horrible, I don't know. But I played along with the game. The final level, or the end boss of the game, requires you to find a red envelope hidden on a shelf. This is for some sort of reunion she's going to. So basically you've got to strip the shelves bare, and somewhere behind all the books is the red envelope. Yeah, but look at the state of the house, lady. I'll let the ending play out because it's possibly the funniest thing I've seen in a long time. If you accidentally move away from the spot that May expects you to be in, this happens. Golf It is our second golf game, and I think this is actually better than Adventure Golf. I think here when you hit the ball it tends to feel a bit more realistic. Some of the levels also feel a bit more interesting. I think if you were playing this with a bunch of friends and a few beers, I think you'd have a good time. With virtual reality right now, I'm not quite sure if it's the future. I don't think we're going to be getting rid of our games consoles or anything like that, or our handhelds, but I do think this is a new and interesting way of playing games. It's definitely more involving, but it's still a bit of a niche product. As a developer, are you going to be developing a game that's aimed purely at VR, or are you going to aim at the wider user base? I think we all know the response to that one, but if it is a new game and it offers VR as an accompaniment to the main game, I think that's the way to go. Ghost Town Mine Ride is a shooting gallery, and as the title suggests, it's a shooting gallery, but it's also an on-rail shooter as well. Once you find the minecart, it takes you through a bit of a tour. The mine ride suddenly ends, and then you're in a kind of a survival horror game. Yeah, it's not too bad, this one. Quite enjoyed this one, looking around. There's a good amount of jump scares and things like that, things to look around and see, loads of different targets. And deeper into the game you go underground and you find this little asshole at the end. Cow milking simulator, as the name suggests, is a cow milking simulator. I've got no idea why I bought this. It just looked fun. Basically, grab the bucket, milk the cow, put the milk in the machine, and you get some sort of dairy product. Put that in the drawer underneath and you get some money. Basically, you have to do it as fast as possible. Is it any good? No.
The only thing you have to do now is to get out of here.
This is Key of Impasse, and can we just take a moment to appreciate that this game costs 42 pence? I was probably paying £3 for a game 30 years ago, and now you can get virtual reality games for this price. It's just crazy. When this game started, I got to admit, I didn't have a lot of high hopes for it. It looked like some sort of asset flip game, but the more time I spent in it, the more time I enjoyed it. This was quite good. It's basically one of those escape room games. You have to find a series of clues to be able to escape. The puzzles are actually quite good in this, trying to find playing cards with numbers on them to figure out a combination key for a safe, or finding a cog to complete a clockwork puzzle hidden behind a picture. Yeah, some of this is quite creative stuff. A lot of it reminded me of Resident Evil in a way. You know, when you're sort of picking up bits and pieces, there's a switch, will you push it, that kind of thing. Will you insert the cog into the clock face, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was definitely worth a punt on this one, and I'll be coming back to this one at some point to play it through. Naked Sun is another on-rails shooter, and again, 47 pence for a game. Kinda makes you wonder what cut the developer's getting out of this. It's fairly well presented, this game, but I did find it a little bit too hard. It does have a video built in with the instructions, but I couldn't get to grips with this one. I kept dying after about a minute. I might give it one more go, but nah, nothing big lost. Virtually Impossible is the last of our 10 games, and this really is a 4-player party game. Basically, you race down the road and you're faced with a series of challenges. It's a bit like that game, I think on the GameCube, was it WarioWare or WarioWare Deluxe or something like that, where you've got a series of mini-games and you all play against each other? It's basically that, but in virtual reality. There's challenges like trying to pour a glass of whiskey when you've got hooks for hands, trying to flip water bottles, have a shootout, or row as fast as you can. These are all fun little mini-games, but it's kind of like that WarioWare game that I mentioned earlier that I can't quite remember the name of. Once you've played these games through a number of times, you know what to expect. And from there it loses its sense of fun. But yeah, I'd play this through a couple of times with friends. And for £1.39, you can't complain. It's been fun being able to come back to my old VR games and play them again, this time completely wirelessly. There was, however, one more game that made me want to get back into VR. This is Half-Life Alyx, and it's probably the most advanced game you can get for VR. This was released by Valve back in March 2020, and it was released to coincide with Valve's own VR hardware, the Valve Index. At the time that was the most advanced headset available, but it cost nearly £1,000, and it was also still completely wired to a PC. So in just over a year we've gone from a wired headset costing £1,000 to one you can pick up for around £300, and it will also work wirelessly. So technology is moving really quick. I really enjoyed the first 2 Half-Life games, so let's give this one a go. So I haven't played the game all the way through yet, I'm about 4 hours in, but what I've played so far has been absolutely fantastic. Playing this with the wireless headset is probably the biggest step forward in VR. With the old systems, having them cabled to the PC was such a pain. You kept turning around to look at enemies, and getting hit by enemies wasn't the biggest danger, it was kind of getting snagged in cables and tripping over. But this new setup has done away with all of that, so you're free to explore the world and pick up all the interesting things. I think at one point I found a series of bottles and you were actually able to juggle them. The VR and the hand actions was just so accurate. The game is kind of designed around a bit of a slower pace. It's not like most first-person shooters, it's kind of a bit more puzzle-orientated. There's plenty of physics puzzles as you would expect from a Half-Life game. Initially it took me a little bit of time to get used to the guns. Previously games have just been point them at the enemy and press the fire button, but here you need to manually release the magazines, load new ones and arm and cock the gun. And there was the odd time I was up against an enemy, pointing my gun at him and press the mag release button instead, but you get used to it. There's small things here like these guys stuck behind this fence. You can shoot them through the fence and then you need to open the gate, and the gate's blocked by this little pipe in the door. So rather than pressing the A button on your controller to remove it, here you've got to physically move it out of the way and you can open the gate. It's small things like that that make the game really involving. I think the combat the game does have works really well. Things like throwing grenades in VR work so well. Rather than pressing the left bumper button on your controller, you're actually physically throwing them. So you can choose your height and your distance by how hard you throw. If you're really quick as well, an enemy can throw a grenade at you and you can actually pick it up and throw it back at them. So if you are looking to get into VR for the first time, I would definitely recommend a wireless headset. I think that's definitely the way to go. It's such a game changer. I think the Oculus Quest 2 is probably one of the best deals you can get at the moment. You can get a 64 gig one for around £300. So if you are looking to get into VR, that's probably the way to go. And as I mentioned earlier, it is its own self-contained system, so you don't need a PC. The games aren't going to be quite as fancy as the PC games you're looking at here, but for the games I have seen on it, they look fine. So I'm going to play through the rest of Half-Life Alyx. I really like the way the combat works in this game. Being able to peek behind walls or hide behind counters and throw things over them is amazing. But I think for now we'll leave it there, and next time we'll get back to some retro. Nothing quite as new as this. Let's get back to the old school. Until then, I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.